Hey everyone, welcome to the second installment of the Military Trumpet Jobs podcast channel. Today's episode is talking about crossover playing or lead and commercial playing. And my name is Brent Proseus. I am the lead commercial player of the United States Marine Band here in DC. We have three stellar guests on board today to help discussions. We have Renee McGee from the United States Coast Guard Band in Connecticut, zooming over from there. And we have Josh Kuaffman from the Army Blues, the lead player there, and Brian McDonald, the lead player for the Airman of Note.
Thanks for having us.
So today's theme for the episode is crossover playing, lead and commercial playing in particular. I just wanted to talk about everyone's journey in their music and how they got to this point where they are today. So if you wouldn't mind, who would like to take it away talking about their kind of musical journey to where they are now?
Brian, you're the most seasoned vet. You should go first.
All right. I'm going to start because I'm by far the oldest and probably have the longest journey that's more years than you all have been alive. So, my musical journey began probably back, trumpet-wise, back in 1993. I was 19 years old. I played in a show band in Spain 6 nights a week after high school for about 8 months. And then that was probably the catalyst for me knowing that, hey, playing the trumpet is what I'd like to do for, a career and a way forward. So started with that. I played on some cruise ships for a little while, and then did some college in between. I'd be in school, did some community college, and go on a cruise ship and do some random gigs and stuff. And then I met up with Roger Ingram on a gig one day. I think we were playing the Ellington Nutcracker down in Florida. And so I got to get some lessons with him, and then auditioned at the University of Miami. So started my schooling there down at UM. And after my first semester, a lot of great players have come out of Miami. And so got the opportunity to join Casey and the Sunshine Band. So I played with Casey and the Sunshine Band probably all 4 years while I was at the University of Miami there. So I was on the 8-year plan. Took me a long time to get my undergrad in and out of school. And in there, also had the opportunity to tour with Maynard Ferguson. So that was certainly a highlight of my trumpeting career so far, to get to play lead for his band and just, be on tour with him. An experience I'll never forget. Hindsight would have been nice if I had done it longer. But I rejoined Casey's band, and then the opportunity came up for the lead trumpet chair in the Airman of Note, and Alan Baylock saw me play with Maynard's band when we were in town here, and said, "Hey, you should check out the audition for the Airman of Note." So I took that back in '99, and I've been in the band. Yeah, this summer will be 25 years. So
it's incredible, man. I love that. Who would like to go next? Josh, let's go in seniority order here.
Okay, sure. Well, I guess my musical journey really started when I was about 4 years old. I can close my eyes and remember this memory as if it was yesterday. I was sitting on the ground at my grandpa's house, and we were watching the Benny Goodman story. And there's a scene from the famous 1938 Carnegie Hall concert, that Benny Goodman did. And there's part of that concert where Harry James plays tribute to his hero, Louis Armstrong, and he plays this short rendition of Shine, one of the tunes that Louis played all the time. And I saw that in the film. They had that scene in the film, and it was from that moment on, I had to play the trumpet. And so there was somebody at my grandpa's church who had a trumpet and gave it to him and said, when I got my 2 front teeth, I could start playing. And so I was a little kid. I'm like constantly wiggling my teeth, trying to get them to come out so I could get like my big kid teeth so I could start playing trumpet. And that didn't happen until I was 9. Fast forward several years. So like from the get-go, I think as early as I can remember, like this was the only thing I ever wanted to do. So like I didn't really have any friends, and I was always kind of a little awkward and ornery, and just like constantly practicing and obsessive about the trumpet and stuff like that, things that probably other young kids weren't maybe interested in. But that led me to North Texas because I wanted to be a studio musician. and I ended up getting degrees in jazz trumpet and classical trumpet, and just wanted to wear as many hats as I could. And it was probably, I don't know, Brian, I might have met you when I was in high school, but we definitely played together when I was in college. We did a lot of stuff with Donnie Dias's band. And then I started studying with Paul Stevens, who was legendary lead trumpet player in the Jazz Ambassadors, and Jay Saunders, who is like the Barbara Butler and Charlie Geyer of like the jazz trumpet world. There's like 18 jazz trumpet jobs in DC, and like 50% of them at least are occupied by Jay students. He was in the Army studio band, which is now the Jazz Ambassadors. I started encountering all these military players in college, and I started to think like this might be a good opportunity. And then I got serious with my girlfriend, who is now my wife and mother of my son. And I realized that like freelancing was probably not going to be the safest, most viable option to raise a kid and have a family and everything. And so I was able to negotiate with her that maybe a military gig wouldn't be so bad. And it just so happened, I just got really lucky that right in my last semester of North Texas, after being there for 4 years, the week before I graduated college, for whatever reason, I had this ultimatum. There were 2 trumpet auditions, the Airman Note and the Army Blues. They were like 5 days apart. And I figured if I don't get either of these, I wasted 4 years of my time and I'm never playing trumpet again. I'm just going to go get a day job. And luckily, I got through both auditions and I ended up winning the Army Blues job as actually a jazz soloist, where I started out on the 5th trumpet book next to the drummer. And so I graduated college and spent my summer in basic training. And then I've been in the Army Blues now for, I guess it'll be 7 years on July 4th, which was my first day in the Army. So.
That's great.
Yeah.
It seems like a common theme is that we cross paths a lot in this field of work. So,
for sure, it is a way smaller world than what anybody could possibly anticipate.
Absolutely.
And that even comes down to auditions. Even, like there's rarely a candidate that comes through that like 0 people in the band know of. Maybe you don't know, but at least have heard of. Very rarely does that happen.
Yeah. And when it does, it usually raises eyebrows. It's like, where did this person come from?
Yeah.
They wait until
like,
now.
Who's that? Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, it just goes without saying, like my musical journey was pretty similar to what Brian was describing. And kind of a combo of you and Josh, you and Brian. I started piano at the age of 5. My mom did piano lessons. And so she taught me and my other siblings, my 2 older brothers and younger sister, how to play. And it was just kind of a family thing to pick a brass instrument right around the age of 10. So my oldest brother, he picked trombone, then French horn, and then it was my turn. And I was like, I'll play trumpet because my dad played trumpet. And so, we've always had kind of that closer bond ever since then. And, at first I didn't really take it that seriously. I liked playing the trumpet. It was kind of a natural instrument to me. I didn't really have too much difficulty playing, but I wasn't better than your average student. I just didn't have to practice as much. And then I remember having a lesson with one of my teachers, other students. My teachers, who was retired, had a student who now plays with Columbus Symphony. He gave me a lesson when I was around 13, and he said, "Are you serious about the trumpet?" And he just looked at me dead in the eyes, and he's like, "If you're serious about the trumpet, you need to start now at age 13 and 14. Now, this is what age I was when I started thinking about this." And I was like, whoa, I guess I got to be serious about this. And when I started lessons, I basically quit all sports. So, it wasn't like I was getting the physical activity anywhere else. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to stick with music. So I had a reason to play. I had a reason to practice. I did all state and all those things. And as my kind of, field of view kind of expanded, I started listening to all sorts of kinds of music. So I got really hooked onto Gordon Goodwin's Big Fat Band, as a kid. That was one of my favorite things to listen to. So every time a new album came out, at that time, they were actually making new albums. So every time a new one came out, I would listen to it to death. I would just hear every part. So a lot of my style and influence came from Wayne's playing, Wayne and Dan Fernero. And but at the same time, I was also getting a lot of that classical tutelage, and I was told I need to, go the orchestral route. So I went to school for orchestral performance. A university that was much closer to me, Western, and that's where I started picking up my first non-trumpet job back in Michigan, working at FedEx, loading trucks at 4 to 9 in the morning for 4 days a week. And it was just super unsustainable. I did that for a year and a half, going playing late night concerts, trying to do schoolwork. I remember one day I was so tired, I almost missed a jazz band concert because I just needed a nap in the afternoon, and my alarm did not wake me up. And I woke up an hour after my alarm happened, and I rushed to school, drove as fast as I could, safely as humanly possible. And I walked on stage as the last person because it was a joint concert that year. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't be doing this anymore. I can't do both, so I had to decide. And I started working on the cruise ship that summer. And that when I started working on the cruise ship was when I made the decision for myself. Whatever I do, it's going to be in music. It's going to be in trumpet. It has to be. I don't want to make that decision. And then the pandemic hit, and I lost all my work in a couple of days. And before I knew it, I was faced with the tough decision of, do I continue in music or not? And a graduate assistantship opened up at University of Cincinnati under Scott Belk. And so tuition was covered, and they had a small stipend. So I was able to wait out the pandemic for a couple of years. Little did I know that the classical professor there, Mike Mergen, he was the most recent retiree of the United States Marine Band to become the professor there at University of Cincinnati. And he told me about the position in the Marine Band in October of 2021, before they even put out the audition stuff. And he was saying, hey, this is the first time they're going to do a kind of hybrid audition for trumpet. It's always been just classical, but they're actually putting in a few optional lead excerpts. So I think this would be a great job for you. And I took the audition in February and finished out the rest of my semester. And here we are today. So very grateful to be here. All right. Renee,
Cool.
take it away.
Sweet. I'm the youngest person here. I feel like a baby all the time. But my name is Renee McGee. I grew up in DC, or not DC, in Virginia, in Stafford, about 40 miles south of DC, because my dad's in the Army Blues and he splits lead with Josh. So I've known Josh ever since he was hired. And Josh, I don't know if you knew this, but you were at the concert the very first time I ever played lead at the National Jazz Workshop in 2016. Did you know that?
No, we were at the workshop together that year. Yeah, I did not know that.
And I remember being scared to death of you because you were the lead player of the 1 o'clock, and that was really cool and scary. So,
No.
So I've looked up to you for a long time. I've obviously looked up to Brian, like every aspiring lead player in the world ever. So yeah, my journey, I studied with my dad. He taught me how to play. He's still, I think I would consider him my primary teacher. He's a lead player. He has a kind of classical foundation. So he started me out, with classical trumpet in high school. He would try and get me to play shallow mouthpieces, and he'd try and get me to play high notes, and, he'd egg me on. And I thought it was, no, that's not my thing. I want to play pretty. I want to have a beautiful, dark, warm sound. And so that was my rebellious teenager phase, was being a classical trumpet player. So I never did any lead trumpet playing in high school, but I would, as part of an ensemble, but I would go with him to work and sit in with the blues sometimes. I would tag along to his gigs. As I got more into trumpet playing generally, I would just try and follow him around to all of his playing functions and watch him play as many times as I could. And I think that was the best education that I could have gotten, was just being around, immersed in that great playing, and having his sound and the sound of all of the great DC lead players in my ear. Yeah, and then I went to undergrad at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which is the basketball school that Michael Jordan went to famously. And my plan was to study chemistry, and I had a music scholarship to double major in music. You know, it wasn't, UNC is not a huge music school, but they do have a good small program. It's a department of music, not a school of music. So they have just kind of they try and recruit a small number of good players to go to the school, and they call them Keenan Music Scholars. So I was on a full scholarship to go to school. And my trumpet teacher at UNC was also the director of the jazz band. His name's Jim Ketch. He studied with David Hickman, I think, for a long time, and he was kind of the father of jazz education in North Carolina. So, and he directed the jazz band, like I said. So when I decided to commit to the school, he asked whether I'd be willing to play in the big band. And since I was on a scholarship, I felt like, okay, I need to contribute as much as I could, even though I didn't have that much interest in it. I was just wanting to go gung-ho classical trumpet. But I signed up for the National Jazz Workshop the summer between my senior year of high school and freshman year of college, knowing that I was going to start playing lead when I got to college. And just got really into it. All the Army Blues, a lot of the Army Blues guys taught at the National Jazz Workshop. Maybe they still do. It's hosted at Shenandoah. And that's where I met Josh. I heard him play with the blues, and I think I heard the Alan Baylock Jazz Orchestra featuring Brian McDonald on lead as well, if I remember correctly. And I was just awestruck, you know, by how much fun it was to just put yourself out there and be loud and not be so careful. You know, I always felt, and I still feel like sometimes playing classical, it's a very kind of careful, cautious activity, and that can be fun from a kind of precision mindset, but it's really fun. It's even more fun to take the risk and to command an ensemble and to have way more musical say. And yeah, I loved it. And so when I got to North Carolina, I was doing all the ensembles that I could as a music major, and I was trying to keep up with the chemistry. Ended up dropping the chemistry because I liked big band so much. I knew that I liked the orchestral, wind ensemble, classical stuff. I didn't know about lead, so kind of decided my freshman year of college to commit to the military band path, presumably to do a concert band kind of role, because that's what I was most comfortable with. And I did the big band stuff just for fun, all 4 years. Went to McGill on exchange my junior year and played lead with their jazz band. And yeah, trying to think what else. Oh yeah, then I graduated into the pandemic. That was fun. In 2020, something really scary about having a music degree is when something like a pandemic hits, the only people who get paid are those in the military in the music industry. And it was really eye-opening and frightening to see Tom Hooten on the internet making videos because he wasn't getting orchestral work anymore. Like, that's terrifying. And you know, the whole time I was growing up and the whole time I was in school, I knew that the military job path was going to be the smartest one financially and in terms of having some semblance of a work-life balance as a musician. And I knew that experientially from growing up with my dad in a military band family. And I have hobbies, I have other interests, much like he does, and much like I'm sure you all do. And I really wanted to play at a high level and also pursue things like art or reading, etc. So I started taking military band auditions and started doing that junior year. I think I took 13 in total, but took a gap year during the pandemic, went back to studying with dad, and kind of shifted focus from just seeing what was going on in the music world, you know, from classical to lead, thinking that the best thing I could do with my master's degree at that point was to diversify the skill set. So I had the chance to play as many gigs as possible and have a crack at as many different military jobs as I could. And ended up going to University of North Texas, playing in the 1 o'clock. And that was the best thing I could have possibly done. Yeah, just really diving into lead trumpet playing head first. I still feel I'm still an extremely young lead trumpet player. have so much to learn. Very kind of inexperienced, but it's been fun so far. And I think choosing lead trumpet as the area of specialty to focus on kind of set me apart from other classical players going out for gigs. And I landed the Coast Guard job about a year and a half ago during my degree at UNT, during my master's degree, and finished up really quickly and joined this band, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, I think you stressed a really important point, Renee, which was talking about sustainability and having a career path in music. One thing I actually wanted to ask Brian was what his thoughts were on during his time with the KC and the Sunshine Band versus now with what he's had a 25-year career with the Airman of Note. Oh man, what was it like playing with Maynard? What was it like playing with, Harry Connick Jr.? And they do like these short stints with them. How sustainable of a career was it in your mind in comparison to what you've been doing now?
Yeah, no, I mean, for all the same reasons that Renee stated, I don't know how, like, I'm not that smart of a guy, but I'll say that like I made the smart decision 25 years ago in yeah, right, Josh, in seeing the value in these jobs in long term, like at in the moment, being early 20s, playing with KC, we're traveling around the world, staying in high-end hotels, just being treated like rock stars. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a really fun gig, and a great band. I know people probably think, oh well, it was disco, but every player in that band was an absolute badass, and it was really genuinely fun. The horn section was great, and the shows were a lot of fun. But I knew back then that, again, that sustainability, like, do I want to do this for 20 years? Do I want to stay here and play the same music as great as it was? And and my first experience to the military bands, I saw all three. Well, I saw the Army Blues, the Airman Note, and the Jazz Ambassadors probably when I was 17, 18, 19 years old. Seeing Tommy Williams and Paul Dubois splitting the lead in the blues, and I saw Joey Tartell playing with the JAs and Rich Herring and Bruce Gates in the Airman Note at the Hollywood Jazz Festival. So, so I saw it back then. I'm like, man, that gig looks really fun. Those jobs look really cool. I want to be in one of those bands. So, saying that to myself back, when I'm 18 years old, I auditioned for the Army too, actually, for the JAs, actually. Gosh, yeah, I don't know, 28, 29 years ago. And, played some, they're like, oh, sound great. They're just there on tour. And, like, yeah, you sound great. We'll send you the Army School of Music. It wasn't like a DC, audition, just a recruiter's like, hey, can you come listen to this guy that plays trumpet? He wants to join the Army band. And I'm like, no, I don't want to just get in the Army band program. I want to be in that band. Like, oh, well, you can't be in this band, So I'm like, all right, well, someday I will, So, fast forward a few years and playing with KC and the Maynard opportunity came about. And I was out of town so much with KC that, like, I mean, I didn't even take one test in like music history at University of Miami, and the professor's like, does anybody know who Brian McDonald is? Because I don't have a grade for him. So I'm on the road too much, and my schooling's not going that great. So I took a leave of absence, and then was able to kind of squeeze in like an 8-week tour with Maynard in the fall of '97 in between the KC gig, and then came back. But and then as soon as the Airman Note job came available, I'm like, I've got to take this audition. So I'm thankful that Alan, contacted me, and definitely been the best decision, to join the ranks amongst a lot of great players, in the history of the band.
Yeah, absolutely. What would y'all say your workload is like from a day-to-day basis? I know personally it kind of ebbs and flows. Right now we're kind of in our lighter season. But as far as like actually having to turn on that high gear and play, and just kind of show up and show out with some of your lead playing, what does it look like? As far as the roller coaster dips go, between your different groups.
Want to go in order of seniority again?
No, it doesn't matter.
No, you go ahead,
Okay.
Renee. Go ahead.
We can go in reverse seniority order.
We're so polite.
So with the Coast Guard band, kind of like you, Brent, I don't play lead terribly often relative to the amount of classical trumpet that I do. The Coast Guard band is primarily a concert band, and I was hired to play lead as needed in the concert band, but mostly for our ensemble, the Guardians Big Band. So this isn't a very recent ensemble. It was formed by our current group leader of the band and our staff arranger / jazz trombonist Sean Nelson. About 5 years ago, is recognized officially as a formal ensemble that the Coast Guard offers. So that's kind of new, and it's all made out of people from the concert band. So our saxophone section is also our classical saxophone section. Our trombone section is also our classical trombone section. And there's a certain number of kind of ringers who are hired throughout the band to play jazz in the Guardians. And so I was hired to do that. And my workload as a lead player ebbs and flows along with the amount of work that the Guardians is doing. So sometimes that's really high, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I put together the first Coast Guard Jazz Festival held at the Coast Guard Academy. It was like a high school invitational for high school big bands. And that was a lot of work to put together. And then I played lead in the Guardians as part of the festival. We were also sent to do the national Christmas tree lighting this past year, which was, as it goes, you just kind of go and then, you have like a 12-hour rehearsal day until everything's ready. And then you just go and do it. But generally, we put together the ensemble just a handful of times a year. I think I had maybe 1 or 2 charts that I needed to play lead on in the concert band during our summer concert season last summer. Generally, I just tuck into the section and play third, which I'm totally cool with because A, I love classical trumpet, and B, I do think that it gives me more of a fighting chance to play lead longer. Maybe that's a hot take and maybe you guys would disagree. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. But I do wonder sometimes if the fact that I'm not playing lead in a big band full time will serve to preserve my chops and reduce the risk of injury over time. So yeah, that's the answer plus a posited question to you guys for later.
Well, I know that. So as far as like my job goes, it has kind of the same demands as yours, where it's on as it's as needed basis. And so for us, we don't even have a designated or even a dedicated jazz ensemble. It's just called the Marine Jazz Ensemble. I want us to have like, the Semper Fidelis Flyers or something. I don't know, something cool that would, roll right off the tongue, but, patent pending, right? And so we don't even have that, but I know what you mean. Like when I played my first real big band show, it was for the Christmas tree lighting of 2022, and that was the 100th year, so it was a really big deal.
Yeah, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, and it felt kind of like a minefield of preservation. We're out playing in 30-degree weather, 12-hour rehearsal days, sitting waiting around in our wool coats, and they're barely keeping us warm. And you're also gonna have to come out and play some lead. And so like a lot of it just comes down to survival and being smart in the moment. But yeah, I agree. I actually personally agree that not playing lead all the time for me personally helps me have fun with that avenue while also not having it become a damaging aspect of my playing. I know Josh probably has some pointers on that. You play a lot more of both of that, so you actually have like a methodology of the way you play, and I actually want to talk about that a little bit because you're very heavy on gigging outside as well, playing on the inside and doing both roles very fluently actually. So what are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, as far as the job demand, I think particularly with the special bands, particularly with the 4 jazz ensembles, the Blues, the Airman and Note, the Navy Commodores, and the Jazz Ambassadors, the missions of all those bands, I would say, are quite different, or what the job requirements are, because we're a dedicated ensemble as far as like you audition for the Army Blues, for the Airman. You know, we're not part of concert band or ceremonial band or whatever.
Right.
Pershing Zone, we're broken into all these different groups, right? But how we interact with the rest of our unit, because sometimes people think the blues is like not part of Pershing Zone, but we're all under this umbrella. How we interact with all these groups are quite different. One of the cool things I always like to point out about TUSAB, the United States Army Band, is that we actually play more missions than all the other premier bands combined. In the calendar year, on record, the Army Band does between 6,000 and 7,000 jobs each year, just our unit alone. So with that comes a huge demand on every musician in the building to be able to traverse different styles, genres, abilities to be sort of chameleons. So like, I don't want to like speak on Brian's behalf, because Brian does plenty of ceremonies and stuff too. But one of the hard things in the hiring process for us is like, in an instant, like just for instance, if you had somebody come in that's like a Freddie Hubbard 2.0 and you put a march in front of them, we have a ceremonial requirement even for the blues. Some cats may think they can just sandbag that and like, oh, they're just checking. I mean, that's a big part of our job. I mean, we're getting slammed right now because there's a Japanese state arrival. And so I've had like ceremonies like 4 or 5 days. Like Brian will rib me. I've worked more in the past 2 weeks than I don't even know how long. We've just been getting hosed. And so you could have a jazz player come in that's killing, but if I can't send them out on a full honor, or if they can't play taps at the Tomb of the Unknown, which it is kind of a stressful thing, we're the only branch of service that has to do that regularly, playing taps next to the President of the United States, you know, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, whomever. That's something that we really only do. We can't hire that individual that maybe in another group you may be able to hire that jazz player because of how killing they are. So I would say generally, like especially in the blues, the level of technical facility among the brass players, really every musician, is incredibly high, because we've got to be able to play in the Latin music ensemble, our the Army rock band downrange, got to play in the Army blues. Sometimes, you know, I started as the jazz player and I auditioned again, became the lead player. We've got jazz players that can play a little bit lead. I might have to go out and play in a combo. You know, I just got asked today if I could do West Side Story with the U.S. Army Orchestra. Like, we're having to jump around all the time. And so obviously the largest piece of the pie as far as our day-to-day work life is the Army blues. But it's always within, I mean, at the end of the day, we work on behalf of the Army and at the pleasure of what the Army wants us to do. And so one thing unique to the blues is I would say we get broken up probably a lot more than the other three jazz ensembles. We're getting asked to do a huge variety of tasks. And with that comes a lot of challenges, you know, like you had just briefly asked, we can get into this later or now, but asked sort of like, how do you maintain yourself? A lot of that, I will say, I learned from Brian, who has been one of my closest friends now. We talk like middle school girls on the phone on like our daily commutes to and from work, you know, but like I've learned infinitely so much from him. And I just have admired him since the time I was a kid, you know, like playing 100% musically, but only 70% physically, like learning where that limit is, and don't letting yourself redline. And we can get into all these things, you know, or I tell my students something that I came up with is you end today with tomorrow's chops. So I'm very religious about, I'm like a very big Jimmy Stamp student, very religious about my maintenance routine at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, you know, how I'm going to set myself up to feel tomorrow. And then, yeah, I freelance a lot. The other nice thing about the Army bands, because we're so big and we don't have block leave and stuff like that, we have tons of flexibility outside of what the job will require you to do. And so sometimes I'm playing shows, you know, 8 times a week, plus Army blues concerts and whatever else the Army asks us to do in rehearsals. And so sometimes it adds up a lot. But I guess one of the points I would make is that I don't believe lead trumpet playing in and of itself is harmful to you. I would say it's only detrimental to your chops if you're not doing it correctly. You know, Brian has done it 25 years, and I've done 2 recordings with the note now, and we've played a lot together, both in the military and out of uniform. And at least I would argue he's stronger now than probably he's ever been. I don't know if he would agree with that, but I certainly think so. We did a Maynard Ferguson tribute at Blues Alley, I don't know, within the last year. And Renee's dad was there, actually. Ken was there, and Kevin and Brian, and I don't remember, Graham Breedlove. And like, all of us are just like, you know, it's like the aftermath of D-Day, and Brian is still standing on top of the hill, like full of ammunition. Just by the second show, he was hanging over to the point where even I was starting to get mad about it. You know, I was like, okay, dude, we get it. We get it. Waving the white flag, you win, you know. So I think if you learn to play the trumpet properly and you live in equilibrium with the acoustics of the instrument, which again, we could talk about later specifically. I don't want to keep going, but I just want to say, like, I don't think the way we, like, particularly like our jobs, Brian and I, it's not harmful. You have to make sure you're doing it right. If you're not doing it right, then yeah, it absolutely is, can be detrimental to your chops and stuff. But it's all about, it's just like being an athlete. It's all about listening to your body, maintenance, your form when playing. And Brian can speak to that probably a lot better than I can, because most of the things that I do now, I learned from him. Either him telling me that I was doing it wrong and how to do it right, or just watching him do it right all the time, you know.
Yeah, would you mind speaking on that a little bit, Brian? I know that you, with your work,
Yeah.
a lot of people look up
No.
to you when you're playing.
Oh, thanks, Brent. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. But no, you're certainly one of the best at you know, playing all the, you know, genres and aspects of the trumpet playing and having it all together at one time. It's really, really hard to do. But you know, just the initial kind of topic of just our different jobs and requirements, you know, of the Marines and the Army and the Coast Guard. You know, certainly in the Airman note, you know, it's a unique thing. You know, we're an autonomous big band, and you know, 90% of my workload is playing lead in the Airman note, you know, year round. So, but with that, there's definitely a lot of different jobs that we do. You know, it's not just high, fast, and loud every time we go to play. You know, obviously with the Glenn Miller heritage, you know, so we take that very seriously and deep in the Miller style that we'll play. But then of course, you know, we'll jump right, you know, to the most modern big band stuff that, you know, that the Airman note records and plays, and then somehow the 1 o'clock lab band just seems how you know, gets all of our charts, and then it's like Airman note 2.0 down there in Denton. I don't know
All
how that
sounds the
happens,
same.
but yeah, that's right. So we could thank Alan Baylock for that. But no, you know, it's tough. I'll say, you know, like as easy as I try to make it look, I tried not to make it hard. So I try to be as efficient as I can be all the time, but sometimes it's a chore, it's a grind. And you know, there'll be ups and downs, and your chops change over time. And um so, you know, you hit different hurdles and you just find ways to overcome. And I think I've been good at being resilient in identifying what works for me, what doesn't, and how to come out of any kind of issues that you're dealing with. You know, some people are just, you know, natural players, like they picked up the horn, and you know, they could probably play high G in ninth grade, 10th grade, but they don't really know how they can. Like it's just coming out. That's not hard. And then other people have worked for years to get, you know, chops to be able to sustain high G's, and they worked at it and built strength and found compression and found a way to do it. So you have every gamut of player, you know, that go through their own path and getting, you know, improving their chops and being able to do that. But as far as I'm going to know, I mean, Josh, I will tell you, I was on the flight line. I played the Japanese Prime Minister flight line arrival yesterday. So I actually played a Bach
Oh, cool.
7D and a
Yeah,
Bach
your
37
classical
trumpet
mouthpiece.
yesterday for the Air
The Bach
Force.
7D, Brian McDonald classical
That's what I did
mouthpiece.
yesterday. That, you know, that's my classical mouthpiece right there. It's a
My lead
really deep,
mouthpiece is
you
bigger
know,
than that.
Yeah, my lead post was a 5D picket for a long time.
Oh man, 7D. That's like I play Easter on that thing. Come on, guys.
That's
That's your
awesome.
C trumpet mouthpiece.
I don't play C trumpet.
28
I'm just gonna
throat.
transpose. That's right. Yeah, 30.
Yeah, you're a
So
gentleman. You play B flat.
Yeah.
that's right. But you know, we do. I mean, certainly the note has a similar use and skill set as the blues. You know, when the commander wants a studio orchestra, then the core group of the Airman note are playing in that. You know, you have the big band, and maybe we'll have a rock band in the strings. You know, get together and either for a guest artist series, and so they're gonna have the most adaptable players from the note go into that environment, you know, to play. You know, I played West Side Story with the Air Force, you know, Symphony, and uh, you know, so in the same aspect, the job can be flexible like that. It's not just, you know, hard charging big band all the time. So you know, and I play ceremonies too. Like I said, I was on there, and you know, we'll play at Arlington as well, and so it's not as probably as much as, say, you know, the blues. I'm not sure what the Commodores use for them. I know those guys do play ceremonies as well, but
Yeah, they do a lot
you know,
too.
yeah, and but you know, as far as the Airman Note goes, you know, we're trying very hard to preserve the brand of the Airman Note, you know, for the Air Force Band, and just take it into the future. You know, I want the band to be roaring in another 25 years. I look forward to hearing the band and seeing what they're doing. And you know, we're just constantly innovating. You know, we're just trying to find, you know, new ways to engage with the public and represent the Air Force and keep the music fresh and alive. You know, we just recorded a Latin album. We're getting ready to go to Brazil this summer. Um, you know, we've been invited down there at the Amazon Green Jazz Festival and to play with the Air Force, the Brazilian Air Force Symphony Orchestra down there. So I'm sure we'll do some really great, you know, big band pop stuff with them. So it's, you know, it's a great time for the band, and um, you know, it's a job that it's as much that you want to make of it. You know, I can make my job really hard. I could try to push myself and play a lot of really crazy stuff on the trumpet, or I can kind of like throttle back and all right, you know, tonight I'm not going to play this a double C. The chart and the band and everything's going to be fine, and I can play it at this level that's reasonable, and you know, and not be swollen the next day. So that kind of transcends to every professional trumpet player. Like, just be smart about your chops, be smart in what you're going for. Be honest with your comfort zone and your box of your skill set and what you can do and what you can do well, and be aware of when you're getting close to that line and stepping out of it, and like, and I'm really pushing it here. So, you know, it's kind of like, you know, bird in the hand kind of thing. So, um, no, but Josh had some great points about that, and certainly, you know, looking forward to talking more trumpet geek stuff.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today's episode. So we actually had to break it down into 3 separate parts because we ended up talking for over 2 hours. Who knew lead players would have liked to talk so much? Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, and be sure to check out the next 2 installments where we talk everything from style, articulation, influence on our playing, as well as the audition process for each of the service bands. Thanks again for tuning in today, and be sure to check them out. See you soon.